plate trembling in Lila's hand didn't just carry a filet mignon. It carried a death sentence. In the underworld of Chicago, silence is usually the currency of survival. But tonight, silence was a weapon. Lila was just a waitress, a ghost in a uniform, invisible to the billionaires and warlords dining at the Obsidian Room. But she had a secret they didn't account for. She understood the language of their killers. When she heard the whispered Russian orders at table 4, she had exactly 30 seconds to decide. Stay quiet and live, or speak up and start a war. She chose the war. Rain lashed against the bulletproof glass of the Obsidian Room, Chicago's most exclusive dining establishment. It was the kind of place where a single bottle of wine cost more than Lila Bennett's entire year of rent. The lighting was low, amber and gold, designed to hide the sins of the clientele while highlighting the diamonds on their wives' wrists. Lila adjusted her apron in the back kitchen, her hands shaking slightly. It wasn't the caffeine, it was the debt. The text message from the loan shark, a man known only as the Butcher, was still burning a hole in her pocket. 3 days, Lila, or we take the house. Table 7 needs water, Bennett. Move it. The floor manager, a rotund man named Mr. Henderson, snapped. Henderson had the personality of a wet napkin and the empathy of a stone. He didn't know Lila was working triple shifts to keep her childhood home from being seized. He didn't care. Yes, sir, Lila murmured, grabbing the crystal pitcher. She moved through the dining room with practiced grace. In this industry, the goal was invisibility. You were a piece of furniture that occasionally refilled wine glasses. You saw everything, but you were expected to see nothing. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted instantly at 8:15 p.m. The heavy oak doors swung open, and the air seemed to leave the room. Gabriel Santoro had arrived. Gabriel wasn't just a mob boss. In this city, he was gravity. He was the head of the Santoro crime family, a man who controlled the docks, the unions, and half the politicians in Illinois. He was in his late 30s, handsome in a terrifying, sharp-edged way, wearing a bespoke suit that fit him like armor. He didn't walk, he glided, flanked by 2 bodyguards who looked like they chewed concrete for breakfast. The entire restaurant grew quieter. Forks clinked softly. Eyes darted down. Even the billionaires were afraid of Gabriel Santoro. "Table 1, Henderson hissed at Lila. "He's sitting at table 1 tonight. Do not mess this up, Bennett. Santoro doesn't tolerate mistakes." Lila swallowed hard. "I got it." She watched as Gabriel took his seat. He looked tired. There were circles under his eyes that no amount of money could hide. Rumor had it there was a power vacuum opening up in the city. New players from Eastern Europe trying to muscle in on the Santoro territory. A turf war was brewing, and Gabriel was the dam holding back the flood. Lila approached the table to pour the water. Up close, Gabriel smelled of expensive cologne and gun oil. He didn't look at her. He was busy scanning the room, his eyes calculating, paranoid. "Sparkling or still, sir?" Lila asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Gabriel looked up. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and startlingly human. For a split second, he actually saw her. "Still, ice. Thank you." It was a small interaction, but it mattered. Most men like him didn't say thank you. As Lila retreated to the shadows near the service station, she watched him rub his temples. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world. 10 minutes later, the dynamic of the room shifted again. 2 men entered. They were different from the usual clientele. They wore suits that were expensive but flashy. Too much silk, too tight across the shoulders. They had the hard, weathered faces of men who had spent winters in places where the cold kills you. They were ushered to table 4, directly behind Gabriel Santoro, separated only by a thin, decorative partition of bamboo and frosted glass. "Russians," whispered a busboy named Toby next to Lila. "Look at the tattoos on the neck. That's Solntsevskaya Bratva ink." Lila's blood ran cold. She knew that ink. She knew that look. But more importantly, she knew the language. Nobody at the restaurant knew this. But Lila Bennett hadn't always been Lila Bennett. She had spent 6 years in an orphanage in St. Petersburg before being adopted by an American family at age 10. She had lost her accent, but she had never lost the tongue. Russian was her first language, the language of her nightmares, and the language of her survival. Henderson shoved a tray of appetizers into her hands. "Table 4, oysters and vodka." "Go." Lila took the tray. As she walked toward table 4, the invisible wall between her past and her present began to crumble. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a spy in plain sight. Lila approached table 4, with the tray balanced on her left hand. The two Russians were deep in conversation. They didn't stop talking when she arrived. Why would they? To them, she was just a dumb American waitress. They assumed their privacy was absolute. The larger man, a brute with a scar running through his eyebrow, was speaking in a low, guttural growl. He looks comfortable. Too comfortable. The second man, leaner, with eyes like chips of ice, smirked. Let him enjoy the water. It is the last clean thing he will taste. Lila placed the oysters down. Her hand didn't shake, a miracle of muscle memory, but her stomach twisted into a knot. She recognized the dialect. It was street Russian, heavy with slang, but the intent was crystal clear. "Is the kitchen asset in place?" the scarred man asked, picking up a fork. "Da," the lean man replied, pouring vodka. "The sous chef owes us 50 grand. The extract is in the mushroom risotto. Colorless, tasteless. But 5 minutes after he eats, cardiac arrest. It will look like a heart attack. Santoro dies. The city falls to us by morning." Lila felt the blood drain from her face. The mushroom risotto. She knew that dish. It was Gabriel Santoro's favorite. He ordered it every time he came. It was the special tonight. "Make sure she leaves the bottle," the lean man said in English, snapping his fingers at Lila. "Leave it." "Yes, sir," Lila said, her voice sounding foreign to her own ears. She backed away, her mind racing at 100 miles an hour. "They are going to kill him. Not in a week, not tomorrow. Tonight. In 10 minutes. She retreated to the service station, clutching her tray to her chest. She looked across the room. Gabriel Santoro was laughing at something one of his bodyguards said. He looked relaxed for the first time that night. He had no idea that 20 feet away, his executioners were toasting to his death. Panic set in. What could she do? If she went to the police, it would be too late. The risotto was already being plated. If she told Henderson, he would fire her for making up stories. He was terrified of offending guests. If she told Gabriel's bodyguards, they might see her as a threat and hurt her before she could explain. And if the Russians found out she understood them, she was dead. They would find her sick mother, find her childhood home. The debt to the loan shark would be the least of her problems. "Just walk away, Lila," a voice in her head screamed. "It's not your fight. These are bad men, killing bad men. Let it happen." She looked at the kitchen pass. The bell rang. "Order up! Table 1, risotto special!" the chef shouted. Lila watched as the plate was placed on the counter. It looked perfect. Creamy, garnished with truffle oil and fresh herbs. A masterpiece of culinary art. A weapon of mass destruction. Another waiter, a young guy named Kevin, reached for the plate. "I'll run this to Santoro." Time stopped. Lila looked at the Russians at table 4. They were watching the pass, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. They were predators waiting for the trap to snap shut. Then she looked at Gabriel. He was checking his watch, likely thinking about a meeting, a woman, or his children. He was a criminal, yes, but he was a man, and he was about to be murdered in cold blood while she stood there and watched. No. The word rang through her soul like a bell. She couldn't do it. She couldn't be the bystander. Lila moved. She didn't think. She just reacted. She intercepted Kevin just as he lifted the tray. "I'll take it, Kevin," she said, her voice breathless. "Henderson said I should—" "I said I'll take it," she snapped, grabbing the tray with a force that startled him. "I need the tips tonight. Please." Kevin shrugged, backing off. "Okay, geez. Take it." Lila turned toward table 1. The plate felt heavy, like it was made of lead. Every step was a battle against her own survival instinct. The Russians were watching. If she did anything suspicious, they would know. If she spilled the food, the kitchen would just make another one, and the poison might still be in the pot. She had to get to Gabriel. She had to warn him. But she had to do it without the Russians seeing, and without Gabriel's trigger-happy guards shooting her. She reached the table. The bodyguard on the left, a man with a broken nose, stiffened as she approached. "Back up. Place it on the side table. We test it first." They test it. If the bodyguard tasted it, he would die. An innocent man, or at least a loyal one, would die in Gabriel's place. And then the chaos would start. "Wait," Lila said, her voice barely a whisper. She didn't put the plate down. She held it tight. Gabriel looked up, annoyed. "What is it?" Lila stepped closer, ignoring the bodyguard's hand, moving toward his jacket pocket. She looked Gabriel dead in the eye. She needed him to see the terror in her soul. She leaned in, violating the personal space rule of fine dining, and spoke the most dangerous sentence of her life. But she didn't speak it in English. She spoke it in Russian. "Do not eat. The mushrooms are death. The men behind you are watching." The silence that followed was louder than a gunshot. Gabriel's eyes widened, just a fraction. He froze. He didn't look at the plate. He didn't look at the Russians. He looked at the waitress, this trembling girl in a cheap uniform who had just spoken the language of his enemies with perfect native fluency. The bodyguard lunged. "Back away!" "Stop!" Gabriel commanded, his voice low and lethal. He held up a hand. He never broke eye contact with Lila. "Say that again," Gabriel said, switching to English, his voice calm but terrifyingly intense. Slowly. Lila switched back to English, tears pricking her eyes, whispering so low only he could hear. "The men at table 4, they paid the sous chef. The risotto, it's poisoned. Cardiac arrest. Please, don't let your man taste it either." Gabriel sat perfectly still for 3 seconds. He was a master of reading people. He looked for the lie, the hustle, the deceit. But all he saw in Lila's eyes was raw, unadulterated fear. He believed her. And then Gabriel Santoro smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that just realized there was blood in the water. "Leave the plate," Gabriel said loudly, for the benefit of the room, "and bring me a bottle of the 82 Barolo. I want to celebrate." He kicked the leg of his bodyguard under the table, a signal. Lila placed the poisoned risotto in front of him. Her hands were shaking so badly the silverware rattled. "Go," Gabriel whispered. "Go to the kitchen. Stay there. Do not come out until I say so." Lila turned to leave, her legs feeling like jelly. But as she turned, she made a mistake. She glanced at table 4. The lean Russian was staring right at her. He saw the exchange. He saw Gabriel not eating. He saw the waitress whisper. The Russian stood up. He reached into his jacket. "He knows!" Lila screamed, dropping the tray of wine glasses she had just picked up. The crash of breaking glass shattered the restaurant's sophisticated silence. Crash. Chaos erupted. The sound of the tray hitting the floor was the catalyst. It was as if the physics of the room snapped. The lean Russian, whose name Lila would later learn was Victor, didn't hesitate. His hand flew from his jacket pocket, revealing a matte black pistol fitted with a suppressor. He wasn't aiming for the bodyguards. He wasn't aiming for Gabriel. He aimed directly at Lila. She was the leak. She was the loose end. Down! It wasn't a request. Gabriel Santoro moved with a speed that belied his calm demeanor. He didn't dive away from the danger. He surged into it. With a roar of exertion, he kicked the heavy oak table from underneath, flipping it onto its side just as Victor fired. Thwip! Thwip! 2 bullets embedded themselves into the thick wood of the tabletop, right where Lila's chest had been a second before. The poisoned risotto slid off the tilting table, splattering onto the expensive Persian rug, a chaotic smear of cream and truffle oil that would kill any rat foolish enough to eat it later. "Marco, left flank! Dante, cover the girl!" Gabriel barked, his voice cutting through the rising screams of the other diners. The restaurant, the Obsidian Room, dissolved into bedlam. Chicago's elite, people who had never faced a moment of genuine danger in their lives, were scrambling under tables, overturning chairs, and shrieking in high-pitched terror. Henderson, the manager, was frozen near the hostess stand, his mouth agape, clutching a menu like a shield. Dante, the bodyguard with the broken nose, lunged forward and grabbed Lila by the back of her apron. He didn't treat her gently. He treated her like a package that had to be delivered intact. He yanked her behind the cover of the overturned table. "Stay low, kid," Dante growled, drawing his own weapon, a heavy, chrome-plated revolver that looked like a cannon compared to the Russian's sleek pistol. On the other side of the room, Table 4 had become a fortress. Victor and the scarred brute had flipped their own table. They were professionals. They weren't spraying bullets wildly. They were firing with surgical precision, trying to pin Gabriel down. "They are moving to the pillars!" Lila shouted, her ears picking up their rapid-fire Russian commands amidst the noise. "The big one is flanking right." Gabriel, crouching next to her, looked at her with intense curiosity. He checked the magazine of his pistol. "You understand their tactical chatter?" "I understand everything," Lila gasped, pressing her hands over her ears as Dante fired a deafening shot. The boom of the revolver was thunderous in the enclosed space. It shattered the decorative aquarium behind the bar, sending gallons of water and exotic fish cascading onto the floor. "Good," Gabriel said, a grim smile touching his lips. "Keep listening. Tell me what they say." "They're calling for backup," Lila translated, her voice trembling but clear. "They said the van is at the back. They're going to burn the place down to cover their exit." Gabriel's face darkened. "Burn it down? With all these civilians inside?" "They don't care," Lila said. "They said no witnesses." Gabriel looked at Marco, his other bodyguard who was pinned down near the wine rack. "Marco, they're trying to torch the exit. Push them back." The firefight intensified. Bullets shredded the velvet upholstery of the booths. A bottle of vintage champagne exploded, showering the area in glass and foam. Lila squeezed her eyes shut, remembering the sounds of St. Petersburg streets at night, the sounds she thought she had escaped forever. "I'm going to die here," she thought. "I'm going to die in a waitress uniform for minimum wage." "Dante," Gabriel commanded. "Get her to the kitchen. Secure the back exit. If they have a van out back, I want the tires shot out. Nobody leaves." "Boss, I can't leave you uncovered," Dante argued, firing another round that chipped the marble pillar near Victor's head. "I can handle 2 Ivans," Gabriel snapped. "The girl is the priority. She's the only proof we have that this was an assassination and not a gang brawl." Move! Dante grabbed Lila's arm again. On my count. 3, 2, 1, go! They broke cover. It was the longest 10 yards of Lila's life. They sprinted toward the swinging double doors of the kitchen. She could hear the zip-zip of bullets passing perilously close. One shattered a pepper mill on a passing service cart, exploding black dust into the air. Dante shoved the kitchen doors open, and they tumbled into the blinding white light of the back of the house. The noise of the dining room was instantly muffled as the heavy doors swung shut. But a new kind of chaos awaited them. The kitchen was a different world. It was hot, loud with the hum of industrial vents, and smelling of garlic, searing meat, and panic. The staff, dishwashers, line cooks, and sous chefs were huddled in the corner, terrified by the gunshots echoing from the dining room. "Nobody move!" Dante shouted, waving his gun. "Everyone on the floor, now!" The staff dropped. Pots clanged to the tiled floor. Steam hissed from unattended pans. Lila leaned against the stainless steel prep table, gasping for air. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked around, her eyes scanning the familiar faces of her co-workers. Then she saw him. Chef Miller. The sous chef. He wasn't on the floor. He was standing by the back exit, the heavy metal door that led to the alleyway, and to the Russian van. He had a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He was sweating profusely, his pale skin flushed red. He looked at Lila. In that moment, the connection snapped into place. The Russians had said, "The sous chef owes us 50 grand. Miller wasn't just escaping the gunfire. He was escaping his crime. "He's the one!" Lila screamed, pointing a shaking finger at him. "He poisoned the risotto. Stop him!" Miller's eyes went wide. He panicked. He couldn't go out the back door. Dante was blocking the line of sight to the exit. And if he opened it, he might get shot by the Russians outside or the bodyguard inside. Miller grabbed the nearest weapon, a 10-inch chef's knife, lying on the butcher block. "Shut up, you little witch!" Miller shrieked. He lunged, not at Dante, but at Lila. He was desperate, a cornered animal acting on pure adrenaline. Dante turned, raising his gun, but the kitchen was crowded with hanging pots and shelves. He didn't have a clean shot without risking hitting Lila. "Drop it!" Dante yelled. Miller didn't drop it. He charged at Lila, the blade gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Lila didn't have combat training. She didn't have a weapon. But she had the kitchen. This was her turf. She knew every hot surface, every sharp edge, every spill hazard. As Miller slashed the knife through the air, Lila dropped to her knees. She grabbed the handle of a large frying pan sitting on a low burner, the one used for searing scallops. It was filled with hot oil and butter. She didn't swing the pan. She swung the contents. With a grunt of effort, she jerked the pan upward, sending a wave of scalding oil in an arc toward Miller's face. "Ah!" Miller screamed as the hot liquid splashed across his neck and chin. He stumbled back, pouring at his face, the knife swinging wildly. Lila scrambled backward on her hands and feet, slipping on a stray piece of lettuce. "Dante!" Miller, blinded by pain and rage, recovered faster than expected. He wiped his eyes and raised the knife again, stepping over a cowering dishwasher to get to her. "You ruined everything! I needed that money!" He raised the knife for a downward thrust. Lila had nowhere to go. She was backed up against the walk-in freezer door. She braced herself, raising her arms to protect her head. Bang! The shot didn't come from Dante. Miller froze. A small red flower bloomed on his right shoulder. The knife clattered to the floor. He spun around, clutching his wound, and collapsed against the prep table, sliding down to the floor in a heap of sobbing misery. Lila looked toward the kitchen doors. Gabriel Santoro stood there. He was no longer the pristine figure of elegance. His suit jacket was dusty, his tie was loosened, and there was a smear of blood on his cheek. But the gun in his hand was steady as a rock. Behind him, through the porthole windows of the kitchen doors, Lila could see blue and red lights flashing in the dining room. The police had arrived. The shootout was over. Gabriel walked into the kitchen, stepping over the spilled food and cowering staff. He didn't look at Miller. He walked straight to Lila. He holstered his gun and extended a hand. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to the violence he had just dispensed. Lila stared at his hand. It was a hand that had ordered deaths, signed illegal contracts, and controlled a city, but right now it was the only thing offering to pull her up from the floor. She took it. I'm okay," she whispered. Gabriel pulled her to her feet. He kept his hand on her shoulder, steadying her. Then he turned his gaze to the sobbing Chef Miller on the floor. The gentleness vanished from Gabriel's face. The shark was back. "Dante," Gabriel said calmly. "Wrap up the chef's shoulder. Don't let him bleed out. The police will want to talk to him." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "But before the police get him, I want 5 minutes." "Yes, boss," Dante said, moving to zip-tie Miller's hands. Gabriel turned back to Lila. He looked her up and down, noting the grease stains on her apron and the terror in her eyes. "You saved my life twice tonight," Gabriel said. "First at the table, and just now by identifying the rat." I heard them," Lila stammered. "I couldn't let you eat it." "Why?" Gabriel asked. "You know who I am. Most people in this city would have poured the poison themselves." Lila looked down at her worn-out shoes. "Because murder is wrong. Even if it's you." Gabriel studied her for a long moment. It was a strange answer, an innocent answer. It was something he hadn't heard in a very long time. "What is your name?" he asked. Lila Bennett." "Well, Lila Bennett," Gabriel said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a phone, not his, but a burner. "Tonight your shift is over. You are not going home." Lila panic spiked. "What? I have to go home. My mother." "Your mother is safe," Gabriel interrupted. "But the men who tried to kill me, they got away. The Russians in the van fled when the sirens came. They saw you, Lila. They know you speak their language. If you go home tonight, you will be dead by morning." Lila felt the room spin. The reality of her situation crashed down on her. She wasn't just a witness anymore. She was a target. The Solntsevskaya Bratva didn't leave loose ends. "Marco is outside with the car," Gabriel said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You're coming with me, to a safe house, until I settle this debt with the Russians." "I can't go with a mob, boss," Lila protested, though weakly. Gabriel leaned in close, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "You are already involved, Lila. You stepped into the arena. Now, let me make sure you survive it." He gestured to the back door, where Marco had just secured the exit. "Come with me," Gabriel said. "Or stay here and wait for them to come back for you. Your choice." Lila looked at Miller, bleeding on the floor. She looked at the terrified staff. She looked at the back door. She took off her apron and dropped it on the floor. "Let's go," she said. The armored SUV moved through the rain-slicked streets of Chicago like a hearse, silent, black, and imposing. Inside, the leather seats smelled of cedar and cold air conditioning. Lila sat huddled against the door, watching the city blur past. Her hands were still trembling, the adrenaline crash leaving her feeling hollow and brittle. Gabriel Santoro sat on the opposite side. He had cleaned the blood from his cheek with a handkerchief, but the intensity in his eyes remained. He was on his phone, speaking in rapid-fire Italian, coordinating the cleanup of the obsidian room. Lila caught fragments of the conversation, payoffs to the police chief, threats to the union reps, orders to find the Russian van. He hung up and looked at her. For a moment, the silence was suffocating. "You're shaking," Gabriel observed. It wasn't a question. "I almost died," Lila whispered. "I almost watched a man dissolve his insides with poison, and then I almost got shot." "Almost doesn't count in my world," Gabriel said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You are alive. Focus on that." The car turned onto a private ramp, descending into the underground garage of a glass skyscraper that pierced the clouds. The Zenith Tower. This was Gabriel's fortress, the penthouse, known in the underworld simply as the Eyrie. They took a private elevator that moved so smoothly, Lila couldn't tell they were ascending 50 floors until her ears popped. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world she had only seen in movies. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city, shimmering like a grid of diamonds. The furniture was modern, stark, and expensive. "Marco," Gabriel said to the driver who had accompanied them, "stand guard at the elevator. Nobody comes up unless I authorize it. Not even my captains." "Understood, boss." Gabriel walked to a wet bar and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He walked over to Lila and held one out. "Brandy," he said. "Drink it. It will stop the shaking." Lila took the glass with both hands and took a sip. The liquid burned her throat, but the warmth spread through her chest, grounding her. "My mother," Lila started, her voice cracking. "I need to call her. She's sick. She needs her medicine at 10 p.m. If I don't go home—" "It's already handled," Gabriel interrupted. He sat down on a leather armchair, loosening his tie. "While we were in the car, I sent a team to your apartment. They moved your mother to a private clinic in the North Loop. Best doctors in the state. She is safe, and she is being treated." Lila froze. You kidnapped my mother?" Gabriel's eyes narrowed. "I secured a leverage point that the Russians would have used against you. If I left her there, she would be dead by midnight to punish you for helping me. Now she is in a room under the name Mrs. Smith, guarded by 2 of my best men. She thinks she won a medical lottery." Lila sank onto the sofa. She didn't know whether to scream at him or thank him. He had taken control of her entire life in the span of an hour. "Thank you," she finally said, realizing he was right. "But I can't pay for that. I can't pay for any of this." "I don't want your money, Lila," Gabriel said, leaning forward. "I want your brain." He pulled a tablet from the table and slid it toward her. "The men who tried to kill me tonight. The Solntsevskaya Bratva. They are not just muscle. They are organized. We recovered a phone from the chef, Miller. It's encrypted, but there are voice memos sent to him via a secure app. They are in Russian, street Russian. Code." Lila looked at the tablet. "My translators are academic," Gabriel continued. "They learned Russian at Yale. They know grammar, they know literature, but they don't know the gutter. They don't know how the Bratva speaks when they are planning a war." He paused, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "You do. I saw it in your eyes at the restaurant. You didn't just understand the words. You understood the intent. Where did a girl named Lila Bennett learn the dialect of a St. Petersburg prison yard?" Lila looked down at the brandy swirling in her glass. It was time for the truth. "I wasn't born Lila Bennett," she said softly. "I was born Katya. I lived in orphanage number 9 in St. Petersburg until I was 10. The older boys, the ones who ran the yard, they were recruited by the gangs. I learned to listen to them so I knew when to hide. I learned their slang so I wouldn't get beaten." Gabriel remained silent, his expression unreadable, but the hardness in his face softened just a fraction. He understood survival. He understood coming from nothing. Just then, Lila's pocket buzzed. She flinched. She pulled out her cracked smartphone. A text message. Sender. Unknown. Where is my money, Lila? TikTok. The house goes on the market tomorrow. It was the loan shark. The butcher. Gabriel's hand shot out before she could hide the screen. Give me the phone. It's nothing, it's... Give it to me. Lila handed it over. Gabriel read the text. He looked at the number. He didn't ask her for an explanation. He simply pressed the call button and put the phone to his ear. Lila watched in horror. Please don't make him angry. He's crazy. He'll hurt us. Gabriel looked at her with a look of genuine amusement. He'll hurt us? Lila, do you know who you are sitting with? The line connected. Lila could hear the raspy voice of the loan shark on the other end screaming about payment. Gabriel didn't scream. He spoke in a voice that was quiet, calm, and terrifyingly authoritative. This is Gabriel Santoro. Silence on the other end. Absolute, terrified silence. You hold a debt for Lila Bennett, Gabriel said, examining his fingernails. I am buying that debt. Send the paperwork to my office in the morning. If you ever contact her again, if you ever step foot on her property, I will have you buried under the foundations of the new stadium I'm building. Do we understand each other? He listened for a moment, then hung up and tossed the phone back to Lila. Your debt is cleared, Gabriel said, standing up to refill his drink. Consider it a signing bonus. Lila stared at him. The crushing weight that had been on her shoulders for 2 years, the fear of losing her childhood home, the fear of the butcher, was gone. Just like that. Because this man spoke a few words. Why? She asked, tears welling up again. Because I need you focused, Gabriel said, turning back to her. I can't have my new asset worrying about a low-level thug. We have a war to win, Katya. He used her birth name. It sent a shiver down her spine. Now, Gabriel said, pointing to the tablet. Listen to the files. Tell me what they are planning next. For the next 6 hours, Lila didn't move from the sofa. The penthouse darkened as night turned into early morning, the city lights below turning into a sea of cold stars. Lila wore a pair of noise-cancelling headphones, her eyes closed, listening to the guttural voices on the audio files. Gabriel sat at his massive oak desk across the room, reviewing maps and loading magazines for his weapons. He didn't disturb her. He waited. The audio was difficult. It was filled with static, background noise of engines and wind, and the men spoke in a rapid-fire mix of criminal slang and code. But Lila's mind fell into the old rhythms. She was back in the orphanage, hiding under her bed, listening to the older boys plan which shop to rob. Matryoshka, the delivery is at the docks. Look for the red star. 3 a.m. Lila rewound the file. She played it again. Matryoshka. She took off the headphones. Gabriel. He looked up instantly. What do you have? They keep saying the word Matryoshka. Nesting doll, Lila said, walking over to his desk. But they aren't talking about a doll. They are talking about a shipment. They said, the Matryoshka arrives at 3 a.m. at Pier 52. Inside the belly of the mother, the child waits. Gabriel stood up, walking over to a large map of the Chicago shoreline pinned to the wall. He traced a finger to Pier 52. Pier 52 is controlled by the Union, Gabriel muttered. My Union. If they are bringing something in there, they have bought off the harbour master. There's more, Lila said, looking at her notes. They said, the chemicals are unstable. Do not drop the canister. Gabriel's face went pale. Chemicals. Unstable chemicals, Lila confirmed. Gabriel, they aren't trying to take over your territory with guns. They are bringing in something else. Something big. Drugs? Bombs? Or something worse, Gabriel said grimly. Synthetics. There's a new drug coming out of Russia. Crocodile 2.0. It eats people alive. If they flood Chicago with that, the city dies. And since it's coming in through my port, I'll be the one blamed for it. The feds will come down on me so hard the family will be destroyed. He slammed his hand on the desk. They are framing me while poisoning the city. Clever. Gabriel grabbed his jacket. I have to go. I have to stop that shipment. If that container hits the streets, it's over. I'm coming with you, Lila said. Gabriel stopped. He looked at her like she was insane. No. You are a waitress. You are staying here, where it is safe. You need me, Lila argued, surprised by her own boldness. The audio file. There was a second part, a verification code they have to speak to the captain of the ship to release the crane. It changes every hour. I have to listen to the live feed to get the current code. If you go in shooting, they might dump the container into the harbor and destroy the evidence. You need the code to get the container safely. Gabriel stared at her. He saw the fire in her eyes. She wasn't the trembling girl from the restaurant anymore. She was part of the operation. If you come, Gabriel said, his voice low, you do exactly what I say. If I say run, you run. If I say duck, you duck. If you freeze, we both die. I won't freeze, Lila said. Gabriel nodded. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a Kevlar vest. It was heavy and bulky. He tossed it to her. Put this on, and pray you don't need it. They prepared to leave. Gabriel summoned his elite team, 4 men, heavily armed, including Dante and Marco. They gathered in the living room of the penthouse, checking gear. The atmosphere was tense, electric. Lila was struggling to tighten the straps of the vest when her phone buzzed again. She frowned. The butcher was dealt with, who was texting her at 2 a.m. She looked at the screen. It was a video message. Sender. Unknown. Curiosity got the better of her. She clicked play. The video was grainy, shot in low light. It showed a hospital room. Lila gasped. It was the private clinic where Gabriel had sent her mother. Her mother was asleep in the bed, hooked up to IVs. But standing over her, holding a phone to record, was a figure in a nurse's uniform. The figure turned the camera to a mirror. It wasn't a nurse. It was the lean Russian from the restaurant. Victor. He pulled down his surgical mask and smiled. Hello, little mouse, Victor said in Russian. You thought the Italian could hide her. We have eyes everywhere, even in his private clinics. He held up a syringe filled with a dark liquid. This goes into her IV line in 10 minutes. Unless... The camera panned to a piece of paper he was holding. The penthouse, the back service elevator. Open it. Disable the alarm. Let us in. Do this, and your mother lives. Tell Santoro, and she dies before you can finish the sentence. The video ended. Lila stood frozen, the phone slipping in her sweaty palm. The room seemed to tilt. 10 minutes. She looked at Gabriel. He was busy outlining the plan to Dante, pointing at blueprints of the docks. He trusted her. He had saved her. He had saved her mother, or tried to. But Victor was there. Right now, with a syringe. If she told Gabriel, he would call the guards at the clinic. But would they be fast enough? Victor was already in the room. If he sensed a trap, he would push the plunger. Her mother would die. But if she opened the service elevator, the Russians would come in. They would kill Gabriel. They would kill his men. They would kill her. It was an impossible choice, the kind of choice that breaks a person. Lila looked at the digital clock on the microwave. 2:05 a.m. The shipment was at 3 a.m. The Russians wanted to take out Gabriel before he could stop the shipment at the docks. It was a coordinated strike. She looked at the service elevator panel near the kitchen. It had a keypad. All she had to do was type in the override code Gabriel had given her earlier for emergencies. She took a step toward the kitchen. Lila, Gabriel's voice rang out. She jumped, spinning around. Gabriel was watching her. He was perceptive. Too perceptive. "You look pale," he said, walking toward her. "Change of heart? You can stay here." Lila's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Tell him. Don't tell him." If she betrayed him, she became the villain. She became just like the people she hated. But if she didn't, she lost the only family she had left. She looked into Gabriel's dark, intense eyes. She saw the man who had stood in front of a bullet for her. Lila made her choice. She walked up to Gabriel and held out the phone. "I can't do it," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I can't betray you, but please, save her." Gabriel took the phone. He watched the video. His face turned to stone. A terrifying, cold rage settled over his features. "He is in the room," Gabriel said softly. "Victor. He wants me to open the elevator," Lila sobbed. "Right now." Gabriel looked at the clock. Then he looked at Dante. "Dante. The clinic. Who is on guard?" "Peterson and Ricci," Dante said. "They are dead or compromised," Gabriel stated flatly. "Victor is inside." Gabriel looked back at Lila. He placed a hand on her shoulder. It was heavy, grounding. "You did the right thing, Lila. You showed loyalty. Now, I show you power." He turned to his team. "Change of plans. The docks are secondary. We have an infestation here." He looked at Lila. "Open the elevator." Lila blinked. "What?" "Do exactly what he said," Gabriel commanded, his eyes gleaming with a strategic brilliance. "Disable the alarm. Open the service elevator. Let them come up." "But they'll kill us." "They are coming into my house," Gabriel growled. "They think they are the hunters. They are about to find out they are the prey." He turned to his men. "Kill the lights. Night vision. Dante, take the east corridor. Marco, the balcony. Lila." He pulled her behind the heavy granite island of the kitchen bar. He handed her a small, backup pistol. "Stay here. Keep your head down. When the elevator doors open, the war begins." Lila's shaking fingers hovered over the keypad. She looked at Gabriel one last time. He nodded. She typed the code. Beep. Service elevator unlocked. The light above the elevator turned from red to green. The gears hummed. They were coming up. The penthouse was a tomb of silence, the only light coming from the skeletal shadows of the Chicago skyline stretching across the floor. Lila crouched behind the marble kitchen island, her grip on the pistol Gabriel had given her slippery with sweat. She had never held a gun before, but terror had sharpened her senses into a singular point of focus. Victor was coming. Gabriel was a ghost, vanished into the shadows of the mezzanine. Dante and Marco were hidden behind the heavy pillars of the living area, statues waiting to breathe fire. Ding! The elevator chime shattered the quiet like a dropped glass. The steel doors hissed open. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then, a metal canister skittered across the floor. Bang! A flashbang. A blinding white supernova seared the room, followed instantly by a concussive boom that rattled the floor-to-ceiling windows. Lila clamped her hands over her ears, disoriented, as the thud of heavy boots stormed the room. Shadows poured from the elevator. 6 men moving with military precision, red laser sights cutting through the smoke like vipers. "Clear left," a voice hissed in Russian. "Find the girl. Kill the Don." Victor stepped out last, a predator entering the pen. "Lila, come out, little mouse. Don't make me make the call." Lila squeezed the gun, her heart hammering against her ribs. She wanted to scream, but she remembered Gabriel's command. "Wait." The Russian hit squad fanned out into the center of the room, scanning the darkness with night vision goggles. They were the hunters, confident in their technology. "Now," Gabriel's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. With a mechanical whir, the automated blinds on the east wall shot up. The building's exterior architectural floodlights, millions of candles of power, blasted into the room. The effect was devastating. The Russians' night vision goggles flared out, blinding them with an overload of white light. They screamed, tearing the devices from their faces, stumbling in the sudden brilliance. "Fire!" Gabriel commanded. The room erupted. Gabriel, Dante, and Marco opened fire from a three-point crossfire. It was surgical. 3 of the gunmen dropped before they could raise their rifles, their bodies thudding against the expensive Persian rugs. But one mercenary, a giant in heavy armor, broke from the pack. He sprinted toward the kitchen island, his rifle swinging toward Lila's hiding spot. He knows. Lila didn't think. She didn't aim. She just reacted. She lifted the heavy pistol over the countertop and pulled the trigger. Crack. Crack. The recoil shocked her arms. The shots went wild, shattering the fridge door, but it forced the mercenary to flinch. That split second of hesitation was his death sentence. Dante surged from the shadows, tackling the man with the force of a freight train. A knife flashed, and the threat ended in silence, but the distraction had cost them. Victor had moved. He slid across the polished floor, coming around the island. Lila turned, raising her gun, but Victor was faster. He kicked the weapon from her hand and seized her by the hair, dragging her up as a human shield. He jammed the cold barrel of his pistol against her temple. "Stop!" Victor screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. The gunfire died instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the smell of gunpowder and blood. Gabriel appeared at the top of the stairs, his weapon trained steadily on Victor. "Drop it, Victor," Gabriel said, his voice deadly calm. "You have nowhere to go." "I have the girl!" Victor snarled, backing toward the elevator, dragging Lila with him. She clawed at his arm, but his grip was iron. "And I have the mother! I make the call! She dies!" Victor pulled his phone out with his free hand, thumb hovering over the screen. "I'm pressing send! Back off! I want a helicopter on the roof in 5 minutes!" Lila froze, the steel barrel digging into her skin. She looked at Gabriel. He hadn't lowered his weapon. He wasn't looking at Victor. He was looking at Lila. "Go ahead," Gabriel said. Lila's breath hitched. "What?" Victor blinked, his confidence faltering. "You think I'm bluffing?" "Call your man at the clinic," Gabriel challenged, taking a slow, menacing step down the stairs. "Make the call." "Do it!" Victor screamed into the phone, hitting the speaker button. "Kill her now!" Ring. Ring. The line clicked open. "I'm afraid I can't do that, friend," a deep, gravelly voice replied through the speaker. "Mrs. Smith is currently safe. And your man, well, he's in handcuffs." Victor's face drained of color. "Who is this?" "Detective Miller, CPD," the voice said. "We got a tip about an intruder 10 minutes ago. We got here just in time." Gabriel smiled. It was the terrifying smile of a shark. "I didn't just watch the video, Victor. I saw the clock on the wall in the mirror behind you. The video was recorded an hour ago. You weren't at the clinic live. I sent the police the moment Lila showed me the phone." Victor's leverage evaporated. He was alone. His team was dead. His hostage was safe. The rage in his eyes was absolute. He looked at Lila with pure hatred. "Then I take this one with me." His finger tightened on the trigger. Lila didn't freeze. She wasn't the waitress anymore. She stomped her heel down onto Victor's instep with all her strength, simultaneously smashing the back of her head into his nose. Crunch. Victor roared in pain, his aim jerking upward. Bang! The bullet missed Lila's head by inches, shattering the light fixture above. Lila dropped to the floor, scrambling away. Gabriel didn't hesitate. Bang! Bang! 2 shots. Center mass. Victor crumbled. He hit the floor, staring up at the ceiling, the light fading from his eyes. The phone slipped from his hand, sliding across the blood-slicked floor. Lila sat on the floor, gasping for air, her ears ringing. She touched her head where she had head-butted him. It throbbed. But she was alive. Gabriel holstered his gun and walked down the stairs. He didn't check the body. He knew his aim. He walked straight to Lila and knelt in the debris. "You fought," Gabriel said, sounding almost proud. "You didn't freeze." He was going to kill me," Lila stammered. "He tried," Gabriel corrected. "But you won." He offered her a hand. Lila looked at it, the hand of a killer and the hand of her savior. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet. "Is my mum really safe?" she asked, her voice trembling. "She is," Gabriel said. "The Bratva won't touch her now. And without Victor to give the code, the shipment at the docks is stuck. The Coast Guard is swarming the harbour as we speak. They lost everything." He looked around the ruined penthouse, then back at her, his expression softening. "The war is over for tonight, Lila. You can go home. You can go back to your life." Lila looked at the shattered window, looking out at the city she had spent her life serving from the shadows. She thought about the obsidian room, the rude customers, the minimum wage, the feeling of being invisible. Then she looked at Gabriel. "I don't think I can go back to waiting tables," she said softly. Gabriel smirked. "Good, because I need a new translator, and the pay is considerably better." 3 months later, the reopening of the obsidian room was the event of the season. At table 1, the best seat in the house, sat Gabriel Santoro. Across from him wasn't a bodyguard, but Lila Bennett, stunning in an emerald evening gown. She no longer wore an apron. She wore confidence like a weapon. A young, trembling waiter placed a plate of risotto between them. "Thank you," Lila said warmly. The waiter nodded nervously and scurried away, terrified of making a mistake. "You scare him," Gabriel noted with an amused smirk. "He knows who you are now." "I just looked at him," Lila replied, raising her wine glass. Her eyes, however, weren't on Gabriel. They were fixed on table 4, where 3 men in expensive suits were whispering in low, rapid Serbian. Lila tilted her head, tuning out the music and the clatter of silverware. The old instinct kicked in, but this time it wasn't for survival, it was for control. "The merger happens at midnight. Warehouse 5. Lila smiled over the rim of her glass. "Table 4, she whispered. "They're discussing a hostile merger. Midnight, 5th Street. Gabriel nodded, his eyes gleaming with respect. "We'll be there to welcome them." Lila reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "Eat your food, Gabriel. It's safe. I checked the chef myself." The waitress was gone. The Queen of Silence had arrived. What a transformation! From a terrified waitress to the most powerful woman in the underworld, Lila proved that sometimes listening is more dangerous than shooting. If you enjoyed this story of suspense, betrayal, and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. What would you have done if you heard the poison plot? Would you have warned the boss or run away? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.